Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Mind Map. Today's topic of discussion is judicial review. First of all, we will discuss about the introduction of the topic. Then we will discuss about constitutional provisions for judicial review, its importance, limitations, and lastly, way forward. First of all, let's discuss about the introduction of judicial review. Judicial review is defined as the doctrine under which executive and legislative actions are reviewed by the judiciary. It is the power exerted by the courts of a country to examine the actions of the legislators, executive, and administrative arms of government and to ensure that such actions conform to the provisions of the nation's constitution. Judicial review has two important functions like of legitimizing government action and the protection of constitution against any undue encroachment by the government. Judicial review is considered as a basic structure of the constitution. Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narayan case, 1975. It is also called the interpretational and observer roles of the Indian judiciary. Suo motu cases and the public interest litigation with the discontinuation of the principle of locus standi have allowed the judiciary to intervene in many public issues, even when there is no complaint from the aggrieved party. Now moving on to constitutional provisions for judicial review. There is no direct and express provision in the Constitution empowering the courts to invalidate laws, but the Constitution has imposed definite limitations upon each of the organs, the transgression of which would make the law void. The court is entrusted with the task of deciding whether any of the constitutional limitations has been transgressed or not. Some provisions in the Constitution supporting the process of judicial review are: Article 372(1) establishes the judicial review of the pre-constitution legislation. Article 13 declares that any law which contravenes any of the provisions of the part of fundamental rights shall be void. Articles 32 and 226 entrust the roles of the protector and guarantor of fundamental rights to the Supreme and High Courts. Article 251 and 254 states that in case of inconsistency between union and state laws, the state law shall be void. Article 246(3) ensures the state legislators exclusive powers on matters pertaining to the state list. Article 245 states that the powers of both Parliament and state legislators are subject to the provisions of the Constitution. Article 131 to 136 entrusts the court with the power to adjudicate disputes between individuals and the state, between the states and the union, but the court may be required to interpret the provisions of the Constitution, and the interpretation given by the Supreme Court becomes the law honored by all courts of the land. Article 137 gives a special power to the SC to review any judgment pronounced or order made by it. An order passed in a criminal case can be reviewed and set aside only if there are errors apparent on the record. Now moving on to importance of judicial review. It limits the functioning of the government. It violates the limit of power set to be exercised by the Constitution when it overrides any existing law. In India, a separation of functions rather than of powers is followed. The concept of separation of powers is not adhered to strictly. However, a system of checks and balances have been put in place in such a manner that the judiciary has the power to strike down any unconstitutional laws passed by the legislator. The judicial opinions of the judges once taken for any case becomes the standard for ruling other cases. Judicial review can harm the public at large as the judgment may be influenced by personal or selfish motives. Repeated interventions of courts can diminish the faith of the people in the integrity, quality, and efficiency of the government. Now let's discuss about limitations of judicial review. It limits the functioning of the government. It violates the limit of power set to be exercised by the Constitution when it overrides any existing law. In India, a separation of functions rather than of powers is followed. The concept of separation of powers is not adhered to strictly. However, a system of checks and balances have been put in place in such a manner that the judiciary has the power to strike down any unconstitutional laws passed by the legislator. The judicial opinions of the judges, once taken for any case, becomes the standard for ruling other cases. Judicial review can harm the public at large, as the judgment may be influenced by personal or selfish motives. Repeated interventions of courts can diminish the faith of the people in the integrity, quality, and efficiency of the government. Now, lastly, moving on to the way forward. With the power of judicial review, the courts act as a custodian of the fundamental rights. With the growing functions of the modern state, judicial intervention in the process of making administrative decisions and executing them has also increased. When the judiciary surpasses the line of powers set for it in the name of judicial activism, it could be rightly said that the judiciary then begins to invalidate the concept of separation of powers set out in the Constitution. Making laws is the function and duty of the legislator. To fill the gap of laws and to implement them in a proper manner is responsibility of the executive. So that the only work remaining for the judiciary is interpretations. Only a fine equilibrium between these government bodies can sustain the constitutional values. Now it's time for the practice questions. First of all, prelims-based question. Consider the following statements. 1. The Constitution of India defines its basic structure in terms of federalism, secularism, fundamental rights, and democracy. 2. The Constitution of India provides for judicial review to safeguard the citizens' liberties and to preserve the ideals on which the Constitution is based. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? 1 only, 2 only, both 1 and 2, or neither 1 nor 2? You can send the answer of this question in the comment section. And now mains question. What do you understand by judicial review in Indian context? Enumerate the key provisions in the Constitution with respect to judicial review in India. So that's all for today. Stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks for watching. For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.